If it's not fun, why bother?
You're listening to the Logic and Pixels podcast.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
Logic and Pixels, episode number 2. Adam and Avery here with you guys, and our subject this episode is going to be accolades. Now, accolades can mean a lot of things, especially when relating to gaming, but specifically, it's not like there was a certain award show that just happened 2 days ago as we recorded this that brings a little bit of intrigue. So that's among some of the many things to talk about. But first, obviously, like I said, Avery's here with me as well. How you doing today on this much better Saturday, because it's not snowed at least over here for a little while?
I'm doing good. And I think last time I said it was like, 50 degrees here where I'm at, and now it's a ripe 70. So we're doing
so I
pretty
hate
good
you
today.
more now.
Yeah, man.
Well, that's just not goddamn fair.
I'm sorry. Can't help it.
Goddamn this bullshit Canadian crap that I'm in. If only I could cross the... Actually, wait, I don't think I really want to cross the border.
Not right now, my friend.
But yeah, the Game Awards happened a couple days ago, and I think I can say safely that both of us agree that the only reason we kind of paid any attention to it was less the awards being handed out and more the trailers, because I think we both recognize that the awards are kind of arbitrary in that aspect.
For sure. It's cool, to kind of see, if you played a game this past year and you thought it was really good and you see, it's been nominated, you kind of have that, like you said, arbitrary sense of just kind of woo, I'm rooting for it. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, I would probably say most people probably wouldn't watch it to see a game win best game direction. They want to see what's announced. They want to see what's new and what's coming out. And there was last year, there probably, aside from the Series X, I don't think there was any big news. But this year, I feel like there was a good amount of stuff that's worth talking about. So,
yeah, obviously, aside from our major topic, just the idea of going on to an award show. Because, you think about it, if you watch the Grammys or the Oscars or anything, you're not getting, a preview of the next album or this next big movie. So to have the Game Awards where there is this aspect of, seeing people being recognized for their hard work, but at the same time also getting to pump up some tires and get, hyped up for the next 12 months to possibly, few years of potential games coming out, for all of us to enjoy as things move forward, especially when, we're coming at the end of a year that has been quite taxing on people. It's nice to have that little bit of extra hype machine to go into things. And if it just happens to be a part of an award show, it's definitely a bonus because, most award shows, generally speaking, if you watch them, are not exactly the most enthralling things to watch generally. You're basically watching, normally if we're thinking the Grammys or the Oscars, like I said before, it's just a bunch of people in suits jerking each other off. That's generally what it is.
yeah.
So, obviously when the Game Awards is what it is, even without COVID existing, so instead of, if it just being a whole stage setup like it normally is, it still doesn't feel nearly as much of a circle jerk. But it also, at least, it's still that because, again, it's an award show. It's meant to be almost this industry kind of run thing. So I think when I went in, because I didn't even really intend to watch it in the first place, I kind of put it on the background when I was playing games just in case something cool came on screen. But within the first half an hour, I'm like, wow, this is actually really, really good to watch. And I ended up stopping and just watched the entire thing. And I didn't leave disappointed. There was definitely a lot of stuff to go through. So, do you feel the same with that? I don't know if you ended up watching the whole thing or not, but...
Oh, yeah. Normally I'd always try to tune into it and watch it just because I'm always curious to see what happens and I never really want to miss anything. And the thing that made me the most excited for it was when Nintendo was like, hey guys, we're going to do a Smash Brothers character reveal during the Game Awards. And it was like, oh... all right, you just letting us know you're going to do it. That's cool. And so my hype level was already insurmountable because anyone that knows me knows that I love Super Smash Brothers. It is one of my favorite games ever. I play Ultimate still regularly, and it's just something that I really enjoy. So of course, that was one reason I wanted to tune in. And then with last year, Microsoft announced the Series X. So this year, I'm not necessarily expecting a whole new console reveal, but it's they showed then that they still have some interest in making some big news and big announcements during the Game Awards. So I was like, okay, well, Microsoft potentially is going to be showing something, and Nintendo has said there's a Smash reveal. So just for the sake of trying to see everything and maybe see if there's something that I like or something I'm interested in, then I'll sit there and I'll watch the whole thing. And I had it on, like you, I had it on in the background. I was playing Borderlands 3 with one of my buddies, and I had it on my phone on my desk, just kind of off to the side, and it was just going, and I rip his ears because I started squealing when Smash was the first thing that came on, but I think he's okay now. It should be fine.
Yeah, hearing comes back, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I mean, from the excitement of the awards aside, obviously, on the show, our intents and purposes are trying to kind of, improve the community, improve the industry, and specifically, I mean, if anybody who pays any marginal amount of attention to, like, I guess, societal reactions to things knows that the Game Awards kind of has been this hot topic and this controversial topic for at least a week when it all started with the Players' Voice Award going on in the background, where people on social media were voting on what was going to be the best game. And obviously there was that fight between Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. And I think, and I'm not obviously saying that Ghost of Tsushima wasn't a willing game, it did win the award, but I think some people do recognize that, yeah, there were votes that were given to that game just because people didn't want to see Last of Us Part 2 win. And it goes both ways too, because I mean, again, like, it's not like we're not saying it's a bad game. And we're not even saying that Last of Us Part 2 could have been like the most deserving game either. Again, it's a fan vote, so it doesn't really matter in the end. It was more the comments, the backstage behind the scenes stuff that was going on. Because I mean, on the front page, who cares? Like, again, like we just said, the award's arbitrary, so it doesn't really matter that Ghost of Tsushima took the award. But it's when I see, especially in subreddits or Twitter threads and stuff, just people, the downright like validity, the volatile nature of some people when it came to an award that doesn't mean anything. It seemed like that's the point where I knew what the episode was going to be this week.
Oh yeah, and one thing for me is when you look at, like you said, it was the Player's Voice and how, not to say maybe that Ghost of Tsushima wasn't a deserving game, but it was a good game, and how Last of Us 2 was a good game. I mean, I have my own opinions. Like there were, out of the 6 games that were nominated for Game of the Year, there were 2 of them I didn't play, Hades and Animal Crossing. And out of the other 4, and this is just my personal preference here, but I thought that The Last of Us 2 was better than the rest of them. Not to say that the other 4 were bad games, because I think they all had I thought that personally they were all good, but the story of Last of Us Part 2 for me was just really good. And when I think back about gaming moments of 2020 in the back of my mind, just experiencing the story of Last of Us Part 2 is still the one that sticks forward the most in my mind, personally. It's not to say that the other games I played weren't memorable per se, but it was just, that's the first one.
Yeah, I mean, it really, again, it's subjective. It's all about what you personally think. I mean, hell, like, I didn't play a single game that was nominated this year out of the 6 for Game of the Year.
Oh, yeah?
So, because, I mean, I don't generally play a lot of newer games right when they come out. Like, I have no interest in playing Final Fantasy VII Remake until it's completely finished, because I don't feel there's a reason to play part of a game that I've already played. It seems just a little bit counteractive to that. Last of Us, I personally don't like to begin with. I tried playing the original remaster. That was my first exposure to it, and I did not like it at all. Like, the first few hours in, I'm like, this is taxing on me. I can't do it. So I had no interest in playing Last of Us Part 2. Ghost of Tsushima is just, it's an early game when it came out to being released, so it's still mostly full price, so I'm not in on that. Hades, I don't generally play a lot of PC. Animal Crossing, I don't even own a Switch. And then Doom Eternal, Same story. I've played the new Doom, and I didn't hate it, but I wasn't like enthralled by it. So it just kind of became a case of like all 6 games that got nominated, I either haven't touched or I just don't really have that much of an interest to. And if anybody should be mad at what games are being nominated or not, it should be me, because you would think like I don't even have a skin in the game. Because there are games that I play that came out this year that got no nominations, and I'm not mad that any of them got nominated, just for the same reasons that last year there were games that I played and think are some of the best games I've ever played. Like Trails of Cold Steel 3, to me, in my opinion, is one of the best JRPGs I've ever played, and almost nobody knows about it, and it's not getting any nominations for shit, but it doesn't bother me. Or there's a game on Steam that I played not too long ago called Crosscode, which was this almost like Secret of Mana kind of like throwback, and it was a fucking unreal game. But again, no real notations about it. And it goes the same way with the Grammy Awards, because I'm a big metal guy, but metal doesn't really have any presence out there. Same goes for the Oscars. Like most of the movies that I go and watch never get any attention. Joker was like the one movie for fucking ever that's gotten any amount of like critical recognition on these award shows. So to go all the way back to the Game Awards, it's one of those weird things where I don't understand why people put so much stock into them to begin with, because for one thing, most of the people that nominate these games are not generally the same people that are playing the games with the same rigor and the same like fandom level that we do. Because I mean, it's the same reason why most movies that get nominated for Oscars aren't like big mainstream, like blockbusters, you know?
Right. For me, like you said before, it's very arbitrary, and for a lot of people, it's just this whole big hodgepodge of just, hey, let's go off and really put our backs up here and support this game and do all of this. And I think in this case too, one thing, talking about Ghost of Tsushima, how a lot of people may or may not have voted for Ghost of Tsushima for Player's Voice because they just didn't want Last of Us Part 2 to win. And it's just a lot of people do not like Last of Us Part 2. And I can understand that game is not for everybody. A lot of people just do not like it. It's, I mean, obviously when what happens, and I won't spoil anything here, but what happens, and early on in the very beginning of that game, people got very upset. Like, they grew an attachment to that particular individual in the first game.
I think it didn't help too that it was through the leaks and not actually playing the game, because I think if it happened at the launch of the game that people would have played it and gotten to at least experience it, it would have eased the blow, because you would have had to play the story right away. But because of the leaks coming in, it made people like already gear themselves up to be mad at something, which of course doesn't ever help.
Right. But yeah, and just when I saw, because I saw the leaks and then I played through the game, and because I mean, and here's my thing, like if you go into that game and you expect that particular event we're referring to not happen, then I'm not really entirely sure what you were expecting anyway. Because as far as we knew, the game was just going to be entirely focused on Ellie. Whereas Joel was the first character in the game. And so I was already under the impression something was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when I saw the leaks, I was like, oh, well, okay, figures. I mean, I'm still going to play the game because I love the first one. And again, like, I still love the second one. I think a lot of people have these blinders on where it's like, oh, well, they're so mad and they're so upset by doing that, and then introducing another character like Abby, and how it made a lot of people very upset. And I think that with all the leaks and everything else, there was leaks, miscommunication about what those leaks were, or not miscommunication, but misinterpretation potentially. And there was a lot of just confusion. And I think all of that confusion just kind of led to the majority of people being just not being as openly receptive to it as
Yeah,
it
they
would have
basically
been.
went in with like rose-colored glasses before they even played the game.
Right. And again, it's one of those things. It's like it's just to someone who, like, if a game comes out I'm interested in, I'll go out, I buy the game, I come back home, and I play it. And when you talk about something like the Game Awards, it's very, I you said people just they have like they're so passionate about a game winning the awards and everything else of that nature, and it's you look at it and people just I don't know, I'm trying to find the words here but I'm floundering, I apologize, but it's
I
just
mean, it's
like
it's 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 kind of hard to explain. I mean, our own psyche to begin with. So I mean, when you're trying to figure out somebody else's like point of view and why they are the way they are, it isn't exactly the easiest thing to quantify.
and so it's like when you take something like the Game Awards, where it's like people are just so passionate about going against a game just because the game did something that they didn't like, it's kind of hard to justify or clarify to yourself, like, why are you like this? Like, why are people so upset? It's just, it's just a freaking video game, man. And it's I don't know, I don't get it, but I mean, I understand that people have their passions and there are things that they're passionate about, but going so far as to blasting people that were involved in the creation of the game on social media, voting for another game just so that the game you don't like doesn't win, I think is overkill. And I don't think that that's something that really needs to continue. Phil Spencer said in the interview that the toxicity of the gaming community is the thing that he is the only thing that he dislikes when it comes to the gaming community. And I agree, like 100%. Like, gamers are some of the most toxic people I've ever met. And it's, I mean, because not, I won't say met because I haven't met any toxic ones myself personally, but you hear all these horror stories on the internet about how you'll have people in Call of Duty lobbies and they'll go send SWATs, they'll SWAT someone else's house just because they don't like that person. Or they'll do that to streamers as well. And you have things like this going on with the Game Awards, and it's like, why is it that people feel the need to be so invested in something? Like, I enjoyed The Last of Us 2, but that doesn't mean I'm going to trash Ghost of Tsushima just because I didn't enjoy it as much as I did Last of Us Part 2. Like, you can enjoy multiple things and it's okay. And I just don't think people really know that or are aware of that. It's just this single-minded mentality, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Well, there's a lot of things to get in with on that, right? I mean, I think one of the most basic things that sometimes gets overlooked is that, I mean, it's for example, in Japan, there is that waifu like culture craze where, or in the case with like idols, where guys basically like devote themselves to being a fan of a single person, especially when it comes to like J-pop. And a large like part of that is just because there's nothing for them. Like, these people, especially in Japan, they work 60 stupid like level hours a week. They don't have any time for anything. And so when you don't really have time to devote yourself to any sort of like a romantic life or even really much of a social life outside of your own work, they kind of just have to attach themselves to something because it's the only thing that they can do. And I think with a lot of gamers, it falls in course with that because, generally speaking, and it's not a consistent stereotype of gamers, but it is still a stereotype nonetheless. A lot of gamers don't really go out. A lot of gamers don't generally keep a lot of friends like outside of their own gamer space. So, and I mean, in my own experience, it was similar to that. The difference, though, with me and some other people is that, I didn't exactly take my frustrations out on people, but a lot of people do that because they when you attach yourself to something and it's like your one thing, it's your one big thing. And if it's just gaming as a whole, and then specifically you go into a subset where you pick this game and like you're the big fan of this game, that's where you get like the toxicity of the console wars, like we talked about last episode. And in this case, with the toxicity on a single stream, you go into, okay, well, I don't like Last of Us, so I'm going to do everything in my power to make that not do what I want it to do. And because Ghost of Tsushima happened to be the game that had the most amount of votes going in to challenge Last of Us, I think a lot of people attach themselves emotionally to that game, whether they played it or not, just because they had so much value already previously attached to Last of Us. And when you mix all that together, especially when you don't have anybody there to tell you, hey, maybe that might be pushing a little bit too much, when you don't have that extra voice in your head or even extra voice behind you to kind of, I guess, pull you off the ledge, that's kind of what leads to that. And I mean, on top of that too, like you said, with the community being as toxic as it is, it's really easy to fall down that trap when it's so comforting in a way, if you are that kind of personality, to see how many other people do it, and in some cases make a decent following, and in some cases make a decent amount of money online doing it.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just, people will be people, I guess, and people will always go after and attack something, I guess, that they just don't particularly like, and it's the way of things. I mean, some people, and some people rightfully so, will go after other things and other individuals and other practices because just in general, most people can come to a general consensus that it's not okay. It's things that should not be happening. But then when you focus in and you hone in on something as just particular as video games, and like you said, people don't necessarily, so some gamers necessarily don't go out of their houses a whole lot. They don't have a whole lot of friends. They don't have a broad social circle. Or if they do, most of their social circle is their PSN or their Xbox friends list. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I've got plenty of people that are my friends on PSN. And
I mean, you and I are both that, so.
Exactly. And not to say that it's a bad thing or it's not valid or, whatever, but it's some people, though, that's just how it is. And when you are just kind of entirely tied up in this community, and that's all you see and that's all you know, then generally, like if someone says Last of Us 2 bad, then that's the thing that you're going to naturally kind of gravitate towards. There's the old saying, you are who you hang around. And then when you get enough people just kind of saying, oh, well, Last of Us 2 was crap, then the majority of people are just either going to believe that or they're going to try and play it for themselves. And they're, instead of just going into the game with a blank slate, they're just going in already expecting it to not be good. And so they'll look for the flaws, and then when they find them, they'll put them on blast, and that's all that they'll talk about, and that's all that they'll focus on. Again, and while yes, I will say that Last of Us 2 was my favorite game this year, it definitely had flaws. It definitely had issues. But it was still something that I could play through, I could enjoy, and it still sticks out in my mind. There are some scenes from that game that just like it was touching. There was one in particular where Joel and Ellie were in a museum and they climb into the rocket and she's listening to the tape and she thinks that it's just a very heartwarming like father-daughter moment. And that's awesome. And it's and yeah, there are some things I could have gone without. I do wish that maybe the game potentially was a hair shorter, because when you have the same basic primitive gameplay style for 20 plus hours, it tends to drag. But overall, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. And, it's just so many people, I think, when, again, kind of all goes back to what we were saying earlier, how when you're just kind of in the bubble, I guess is a good way to put it, and the people that you're surrounding yourself with are all just kind of saying Last of Us 2 bad, and you can't look at something subjectively instead of objectively. Like, that's when there's a problem, because you're only looking at something objectively because someone else told you to from a negative light and a negative context, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't help too that a lot of gamers, and again, it's not a consistent stereotype, but it is, like I said, a stereotype nonetheless, is the lack of social skills. And I mean, I used to be that. I used to be that growing up until I pretty much hit like high school. And then I found a group of friends that pulled me out of my comfort zone. And that led me to do things like play in a band. And because of that, it got me on stage, and I was the lead singer. So I had to talk, I had to interact with people. And because of that, it led me to doing things like going into broadcasting for television. And because of that, had to be on camera, had to be behind the camera, had to direct things. Same goes for like being in college and high school and the like. You obviously do things like presentations. Some of them are just, putting up a PowerPoint, and then some of them are actually just standing up and presenting. And because of that, it allowed me to spend a lot of time socializing. And because of that, mixing that with everything I did in college, and then started doing podcasts not too long after that, because that I've had the time to refine my vocabulary to be able to know how to speak to people back and forth, it's made it easier for me to be able to have the cognitive responsibility to see what I'm looking at from the other perspective of the person in front of me, or at least like the people around me. So instead of just only worrying about my very, very small solitary view on things, I think, okay, does my opinion necessarily factor into everything, or is it just one opinion? And I think you brought up one thing that made a lot of sense, where you said Last of Us 2 was your favorite game. And that's one of the biggest things when it comes to this whole Game Award stuff, where I don't understand why people are so concerned about the Game Awards Game of the Year, or the Golden Joysticks Game of the Year, or what IGN or GameSpot or Kotaku or Polygon or The Escapist or Rock Paper Shotgun, you get the idea. Whatever they rate as their Game of the Year, why does that matter in the end? It's just their opinion, or a collective of opinions saying this is our favorite game. Whereas none of them, like almost everybody's either saying Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Hades, Doom Eternal. None of those games I've played this year, and I'm going to have my own set. Hell, I mean, the game of the year for me this year probably isn't even going to be a game that came out this year, because that's kind of the nature of where I play games. But I would never think that because this place gave Last of Us Part 2 the game of the year, that suddenly that means that the games that I like the most aren't that good. And I think that's the weird dichotomy that I'm seeing here. It seems like people are almost taking the Game Awards with The Last of Us cleaning out on the awards. I think they won like 7 or something on that show, and taking it like it means that no other game is better than Last of Us Part 2, to which I say, yes, any game that you personally perceive to be better than Last of Us 2 is better than Last of Us 2, because someone else's enjoyment of X does not dilute your enjoyment of Y. It's
Right.
really simple, and some people don't seem to figure that out because they're too lost. Whether it's in just the straight up fanboyism, like that sports team level, like fan interaction, like your team has to always win, or even as we obviously don't want to get too deep into that, but just the political landscape of things right now, because it is like, for some people that may not know, the Last of Us 2 debacle is less about the game so much as it is the social activism to it. And there's a lot of people that take that part of it into consideration when they want Last of Us 2 to basically like go and die in a ditch. So I think there's that multitude of it, but the core of it just comes down to, it doesn't matter who wins an award, because it shouldn't dilute your enjoyment of what you enjoy. Because if that was the case, how could I ever enjoy any album that I listen to, any movie that I watch, because they're almost never nominated ever.
Yeah, and that's another point. Is that everyone is different, and everyone has different tastes, and everyone is going to look at something differently. The whole point of art is, it's how do you perceive it, you the individual, and And that's something, another thing, you were talking about is how just because you don't enjoy X, that shouldn't interfere with your ability to enjoy Y. And I said at the very beginning of this, or earlier on, or I don't remember exactly, but just I love Super Smash Brothers. Super Smash Brothers is one of my favorite games. I play it regularly. Now, again, The Last of Us Part 2 was my new favorite game. I say it was my personal game of the year because it was a new game that came out this year, and it was the new game that came out that I enjoyed the most. But I do have other games that I do play regularly. Smash Ultimate being one of them. Borderlands 3 being one of the others. I mean, I've probably put more time into Smash Ultimate and Borderlands 3 combined than probably, I dare say, 6 or 7 or 8 playthroughs of Last of Us Part 2. Just because that's how much I enjoy those games. Now, when those games came out those years, those games were my game of the year. For 2018, Smash Ultimate. 2019, Borderlands 3. And then 2020, it's Last of Us Part 2. And it's just everyone is different. And everyone has their different tastes. And they perceive and enjoy art differently. One thing with the Joker movie that came out was, I remember distinctly when I went to go see that movie. I think it was, I can't remember the exact scene, but there was a couple that just got up and left in the middle of the movie. And I think it was when, gosh, I'm racking my brain trying to remember. I want to say it was the scene where he was doing a dance somewhere, and they were I kind of overheard them murmuring amongst themselves. They were like, "Dude, this is weird. I gotta go." And like,
I was gonna say, I was willing to bet. I'm like, they probably got weirded out by this movie because the way that it really is like a very like maniacal, like in the mind of a psychopath kind of movie.
Right. And I was like, "Dude, this is weird. I gotta go." And then they got up and they left. But for me, personally, I was fascinated. Just to be able to see the descent of man. Someone, and of course the character of the Joker, and has always fascinated me. I mean, if you ask me who some of my favorite characters are, it's typically always a villain or an anti-hero of an already pre-established hero. Like from Marvel Comics, like my favorite character is Venom because he's the antithesis of Spider-Man. Like, yes, he still has the same abilities as Spider-Man, but he also has these darker urges because of his source of power. He wants to do good, but at the same time, like he doesn't. And it's the same thing with that's why Venom is it's just that dichotomy of having the whole just anti-hero, and like, I don't know, it's hard to just explain or describe it. But with the Joker anyway too, just he's my favorite character just because of how he is almost like the anti-Batman. He's a darker hero, but he does not kill. And he believes that once you cross that line, you never go back. Whereas Joker, he's bright and cheery and happy, in comics anyway. But then when you look at him, he's a murdering psychopath. And just how the origin of the Joker and seeing how anyone can have that one bad day, and if you stack on enough weight on a camel, eventually its back will break. And it was kind of the theme there too. But anyway, I'm getting carried away. But just watching
it's funny that you do say Joker though, because like I remember that as soon as the movie was over and we went and talked about it afterwards, and the words out of one of my friend's mouth, and I'll never forget it, he said, "I swear to God, if Joaquin Phoenix doesn't win the award for Best Actor after this role, like what the fuck?" And I looked right at him and said, "Why does that matter?"
Oh yeah, yeah, that's
Like
true.
literally, it fell into that exact thing. It's like I looked at that and I'm like, who cares?
Right.
It's like you know that it was a great performance. I watched the movie. I knew it was a great performance. But again, how many great performances have I seen on screen? Like I thought Ryan Reynolds was amazing as Deadpool, but does that mean he deserved an Oscar for it? I don't know. That's not my decision. I'm
Right.
if I was the one running the Oscars, that's probably it. But there's a reason why I wouldn't be running the Oscars. So
Oh yeah. And I agree like 100%. I think that Joaquin Phoenix, I think he did a phenomenal job as the Joker. And I think that he definitely does. I'm now saying someone like, oh, they deserve I think deserving an award is definitely different than deserving praise. I think receiving praise is different than receiving an award. I think if I think the and again, as I said previously, like art really is like, how does it make you the individual feel? I think some people, like the couple that got up and left during my viewing, obviously it made them feel very uncomfortable and they had to leave. But watching Joker for me, like by the time I left the theater with my friend and we were talking about it, I was like, dude, that movie was almost like a car crash. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, it's uncomfortable, but you can't look away. And I was like, that I was just I still remember that feeling in my chest, that weight, just walking out of the theater and seeing and like, remembering what happened on the screen and just how he did such a good job. And like, it's no secret, I thoroughly enjoyed the Joker movie. And do I think Joaquin Phoenix did a good job? Absolutely. But since that art means something to me, it was special to me, I thought it was good. Of course, I'm going to give Joaquin Phoenix praise. But that doesn't mean I think that, like, where do I have the right to say that he was the best lead actor in a role that year?
now he obviously
Personally,
happened to win the award, but that was a bonus.
right.
Because that's the thing with the awards. It's a bonus if you get to see something you love win the award.
Of everything else I watched that year, again, just for like as a personal preference, yes, I thought from everything that I saw and experienced that year, I personally believe that he did the best job. But it also goes back to like, but at the end of the day, like I can say that all day long, but it kind of goes back to like, who cares? Why does it matter? Like it shouldn't matter to the masses if they win an Oscar. Like really, it should just be, oh, did you enjoy it? Did you think it was good? Regardless of what the toxic dudes and girls online are telling you, despite what these review critics are writing down on their web pages, like, forget all that noise. What did you think about it? And I personally, like, I've stopped even paying attention to game review sites like Polygon, IGN, and others because it's just like it. They are not me. They are not looking at, and I don't care what people say. Games are an art form now, but it's like how they perceive that particular piece is going to differ from how I perceive that particular piece. And in the same way that whether it's a movie, a painting, a video game, a TV show, how I interact with it is going to be different with how someone else interacts with it. And I don't know, it's all kind of coming back full circle to, well, that really it just depends on the individual and they are who they hang around and everything else of that nature. So, but anyway, that's just what I think about it. And I don't know. I just wish that people were not as have the skin in the game, as it were, so passionate about trying to tear something else down just because they disagree with it or didn't like it as much as someone else did. Like, if someone else enjoyed it, let them enjoy it. Let them enjoy their art. It's a video game. Most people, especially this year, gosh, people come to video games for escape, to kind of just get away and escape their reality and use it as a tool to just kind of help them relax. And, it's, I miss the simpler times of gaming when this wasn't as prevalent. You know what I mean?
It really does feel like we've gone from, because I remember what it used to be like. It used to just be, why don't you like this? And it's evolved into, why don't you like this exactly the way that I like this? Why don't you like this for the same reasons that I like this? And it goes in so many different ways. Like, you obviously mentioned review sites. I wanted to talk about review scores as soon as we kind of put the cap on the Game Awards here, so we'll get into that in a moment. But I mean, it really goes down to, like, people just can't accept, it seems these days, or not everybody, but like a very, like, not a majority, but certainly a very vocal minority of people don't seem to understand that not everyone is going to share the same exact beliefs, the same likes, the same level of likes that they will. I obviously, like I said, I don't really care much for Last of Us Part 2, and we've been talking back and forth about this game for the last 30, 40 minutes, and at no point has either of us gone back at each other and saying, well, actually, you really should like this game, or actually, I don't understand why you like this game. It doesn't happen, because we both understand that, Avery seems to like these kind of games, and I don't. And the same goes for you. Be like, I like this kind of game, but Adam, it doesn't seem to kind of jive with him very well. Okay, that's fine. And it's that's the problem. It's that these people can't help themselves, whatever, if it's a lack of social skills, if it could be mental instability or insecurity, or if it's just straight up like just plain old anger. There's a very, very consistent number of people that just seem to have this point of view that what I think is correct. And I know that falls into both fans and journalists alike, because there's plenty of articles that have come out over the years where it's like, no, you guys should think that this person is a piece of shit, or this game is a piece of shit, or this is that. And the same has gone for all these Twitter tirades of people saying that, yeah, The Last of Us 2 is a piece of shit. No one should ever be giving this thing votes. Any award for it is fake. It's nothing but liberal bullshit or social justice warrior bullshit. Or whatever they want to, change the narrative to right now with this specific instance of the Game Awards. It really just comes down to, I'm mad because the game that I like didn't get the recognition at the same level of this game that I didn't like. There's so many other things to go around with that, but the constant is just, you are mad because something you like didn't do as well as something you don't. And the reality is you shouldn't care. You should not give an iota of a shit that Last of Us Part 2 won 7 or how many ever awards it won at the Game Awards. Because let's just assume the player's voice thing. Everybody who voted for Ghost of Tsushima actually thought Ghost of Tsushima was the best game. If you really think that Last of Us Part 2 is that bad a game, and if Last of Us Part 2 actually won the player's voice award, but instead won the Game of the Year award, obviously, so it goes both ways. Actually, you know what? Yeah. For anybody who is a Ghost of Tsushima fan and thinks Last of Us Part 2 doesn't deserve Game of the Year, who cares? Go enjoy Ghost of Tsushima. And if you're a Last of Us Part 2 lover and you're mad that people, whether it was legitimate or not, voted for Ghost of Tsushima to win player's voice, why do you care? Because clearly your voice says that you really love that game. So go and enjoy that game. That's the constant you need to understand. Right now I'm playing Persona 5 Royal. Persona 5 Royal got one nominee this year, didn't win. Should I be mad because I love Persona 5? No, why should I? I'm enjoying playing the game right now. Same goes for a lot of games I've played in the past. I already mentioned Trails of Cold Steel 3 and Crosscode. Hell, and it's even a great tie into review scores. I'm literally looking at on my shelf right now of my old PS2 collection. There's a game on my shelf called The Bouncer. When it first came out, it got lambasted. People hated it. They gave it I think 5s and 6s. I've played that game personally. It's one of my favorite games. I love that game on PS2. So, if I really gave so much of a shit, if somebody rated a game a 5 or a 6 that I actually like, something akin to an 8 or a 9, that should really affect me, but it doesn't. So why is that? Is that not an interesting question to some of these people who seem to take such an emotional attachment on this?
I think it's a valid point. And you brought up something else, a really good point as well, is how a lot of people, they'll put these games on blast that may not have been like super high scoring, but there are people out there that do enjoy them and they have fun with them and they do play them. You mentioned your PS2 shelf. I'm looking at my original Xbox shelf and two games up there that I love were actually three: Kung Fu Chaos, Whacked, and Quantum Redshift. Those were three games that were out during that time that they were all, I believe, launch window titles for the original Xbox. And people, and they didn't get a lot of substantial critical acclaim, and a lot of people were just kind of whatever about them. But for me, those three games, like some of my fondest childhood memories, are playing those three games on the original Xbox. Like I love those games. And just because other people don't doesn't mean that I can't, you know? And another game came out this year, and I don't think it was nominated for a single award, but I still believe like it was a fun game. Maneater.
Yeah,
You
no, it
know,
didn't get 90 nominations. I don't think it got any nominations. No, I think you're right.
it didn't, but I still enjoy it. Like it was a cheap, well, I say cheap compared to like a brand new AAA title. Maneater was $40. And what's interesting is that when it came out, when it released, I went to my local Walmart and my local GameStop. And both stores literally could not keep stock of the game. People just kept buying it. Because, like, when you look at, like, just, hey, like, dude, who wouldn't want to be a shark eating people? That sounds fun. Like, it's not necessarily going to be this huge AAA experience with a groundbreaking story and the greatest graphical fidelity and technology and everything else. It's just dumb fun. It's just
Yeah,
something
it doesn't have to be this like emotionally inspiring or like super like in what's the word I'm looking for? Like just it's like this inventive thing that like breaks the entire industry and changes it. Like no, it's sometimes it's just a fun game. That's all it has to be.
right. And like you don't. And a lot of people, I think, they just and talking about review scores and game awards and everything else. A lot of people, it's just like if it doesn't reinvent the wheel, it's not good enough. And I feel like a lot of people are always constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's sometimes it's like if you just stick with what works and what's fun, like that's fine. And no one is going to judge you for it. Doom Eternal, for an example. One thing they did, they had their story campaign, and for the multiplayer mode, they said that we're going to do something called Battle Mode, which is a 2v1 or a 3v1 or something like that. Shows how much I play it. But it's like two or three demons versus the Slayer. I think it's two demons. I'm pretty sure it's two demons. It's two demons versus the Slayer, and you have one team is literally just the Slayer, and then you have two other people playing as demons. And they were like, well, we wanted to do battle mode because it wasn't like a traditional death match, and that's not something that we really wanted to do, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, I get that. But just about almost every time they did a video where battle mode was even remotely mentioned, you would have a slew of comments saying something like, hey, like, why can't you guys just give us a death match? Like, I know you don't want to do the same old that everyone else has been doing, but we'd like to see a death match. Now, to the people that enjoy, and this kind of goes back to, you enjoy what you enjoy, and that's fine. To the people that enjoy battle mode, like, hey, that's cool. But just from what I have seen, the majority of people have been saying, like, oh, well, a deathmatch would have been really cool too. And just, I mean, maybe they should have had both in there. And for the people that like battle mode, you can have battle mode. For the people that want deathmatch, you have a deathmatch. But they were so focused on trying to bring something fresh and new that they missed out on an entire player base that just was looking for something fun and familiar.
Well, there's a lot of things specifically about review scores that kind of drive me off the wall. And you were talking about how generally people don't rate games very well if it doesn't like reinvent the wheel in some aspect. One of my favorite things that I see with a lot of reviews is that if it's a sequel to something, it automatically can't have a good rating unless it's better than the game that it just came from. To which I go, no, the rating has nothing to do with what came before. The rating has to do with how you feel about the game you're currently playing. For example, I saw a lot of people review Kingdom Hearts 3 last year and said that this game is nowhere near as good as the original games. The story isn't as good. And they automatically like talked about it like it was a bad game, in which I played the game and said, yeah, no, I don't like the story nearly as much as 2, but this is still a really fun game. So why are we acting like just because we may not think it's as good as this game that came before it, that it must not be a good game anymore? It's like, no, it can still be a good game and not be as good as the game before it. Like, that happens all the time. I mean, Mass Effect
Right.
2 is one of the best Mass Effect games, actually is the best Mass Effect game in the series, and Mass Effect 3 is still a great game, apart from the ending. But a lot of people didn't even just like give it like a half rating less, which I also don't like. I don't like the decimal stuff with ratings. But they gave it a couple of points off, and I looked at that and went, okay, like let's assume, because I think Mass Effect 2 personally is a 10. I think it's one of the best games I played on that generation. Mass Effect 3 comes out, it's 1 point less at most. You can't give it much more than that because it's better than Mass Effect 2 in a lot of ways. They really improved the battle system. There's definitely some higher stakes in the story as well. Granted, the ending isn't that great, but most things were still improved upon. So for anybody to give a lesser rating comes down to, quite frankly, as we were talking about, with just the fanboyism that just automatically hates something to the point you have to get rid of it. A lot of people hated the ending so much that clouded their judgment of a game because they went, okay, I hate this one thing, so I'm going to completely cancel out everything. And with the sequels, to tie it all back in together, I think the biggest core problem that I see with a lot of reviews is that they always let their emotion about a single thing or a very small amount of things suddenly just completely dilute the rest of the review because they can't stop talking about the one thing bothering them instead of all the things that they really liked.
Right. I totally agree with you on that one, like 110%. It's we're talking about sequels in particular too. I'm I know I'm in the minority for thinking this, but when you look at Batman Arkham Asylum, when that game came out, a lot of people were like, hey, this is a property, a video game of a property, and it doesn't suck. It's actually pretty good. And so then Warner Brothers was like, oh, we like money. You're making a sequel, which, to be fair, they were already making the sequel alongside Asylum, like, because there was a secret room in Asylum where you can see the concept art for City. Like, they
That
were
took
already
forever
working
for
on
people
it.
to find, I think, too.
Do what?
I think it took like literally until the game got released for somebody to find it, didn't they?
Just about, yeah. And it took them a good minute. But with City, and this is me personally, while I do think that the gameplay was a lot more fleshed out, combat was greatly improved, I was not that crazy about the story in Arkham City. I don't know what it was or what it is. It just did not resonate with me as well as it did on Asylum. It's like they tried to go for something of a larger scale, but because of the limitations of the Xbox 360 at the time, they could only go but so big. And then continuing on in terms of, Rocksteady, anyway, you had Arkham Knight. And with Arkham Knight, I know everyone has their preferences and whatever, but I loved Arkham Knight. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that the story of Arkham Knight was better than Arkham City's story. Granted, I think the Batmobile is a little overplayed, but I enjoyed Arkham Knight. I thought that it was like the ultimate, like, hey, this is the creme de la creme when it comes to how we're going to flesh out combat. Like, boom. And I really enjoyed that. And, when you talk about how if it's a sequel to something, it has to be better or it's not good at all. I still thoroughly enjoyed Arkham City. I think that gameplay wise, it was better than Asylum, but story wise, Asylum was better than City. And then you have a game like Night where gameplay and story wise, I felt like it was, because I think the gameplay suffers a bit because of the Batmobile, but otherwise, I think that the combat gameplay is still better than City, as it is in Night, and I think the story of Night is better. It really just depends on a case-by-case basis. Like Mass Effect 2, I totally agree. I think Mass Effect 2 is wonderful. But just because Mass Effect 2 was wonderful, I don't think Mass Effect 3 was a bad game. And just like everything else we've talked about already, too. Like Last of Us Part 2, for an example. Last of Us Part 2, it has its flaws. And a lot of people don't like it. But that doesn't mean it's a bad game. It really just
To
depends.
them it might, but to you it doesn't.
Right. And it really just depends, as I've said before, kind of goes back to how do you, the individual, interpret the art? And how does it make you feel? How do you interact with it? And it's really, and I think that's kind of the beauty of video games that's kind of been lost a little bit, is how used to, way back, you didn't have, well, maybe we did have it and we just weren't as noticeable of it, but we didn't notice it as much. But used to, you would have a large group of people where they had the commonality that they enjoyed something. Before the sequel trilogy came out and Disney took over Star Wars, people loved Star Wars. And it wasn't necessarily something where it was just like, oh, well, I think it's trash. Like, no one was really trashing Star Wars, but you just had a whole community that was unified in loving Star Wars. It was something that they were passionate about. And now that we're in this day and age where, we don't vote for games because we like them, we vote for them because we don't like the other guy. And it's also kind of coincides with the whole sequel trilogy coming out and a lot of fans being mixed on that. It's you have people trashing Star Wars. Now, some people may feel like it's warranted, others not. And, while, yes, this is a gaming channel and I do have my own opinions about the sequel trilogy, as I'm sure everyone does, the point, though, is that it's one of those things where, and I've said this before earlier, too, in this episode, is how I miss the days when, instead of just having groups of people that just, well, I don't like this, just having groups of people to say, like, hey, I do like this, and then coming together because they enjoy something, not because they want to take something else down,
The honest gist of things now is that there always used to be people who hate Star Wars and like Star Trek, and people who hate Star Trek and like Star Wars. The problem now is it's a social media issue, because now you can put out your opinion on there, and you can also go after somebody, and then you don't have to be face to face. Because back in the 60s or 70s, or any time before, really, like Twitter and Facebook and well, I mean, the internet existed to some extent with forum pages and such, but generally, once we got to social media, that's where things have kind of really gone downhill. When you can go anonymously and attack things because you don't have to go face to face, because a lot of people, let's be honest, are cowards and can't do it because they would never have the mental fortitude to stand up for their convictions because, again, you know, as we said earlier, a lot of these people don't have the right social skills and don't really get out a lot, so they aren't used to talking to people. And I've seen it before. I've gone to local conventions where I live and set up panels, and I've tried to bait it. I've tried to talk about subjects to get people mad, to see if I can bring that out because I want to talk to these kind of people. And it never happens. I'll talk about stuff, and then when it goes to Q&A, because I usually like do half the panel, I just talk about things that are going on, and I open up the rest of the half. And no matter how many times I did controversial topics, specifically whether it was gaming, anime, or whatever else, I never got that level of language where it's like, oh yeah, you know, it's SJWs, and it never happened. And that tells me that these people can't do it when it's their face there, because they know that all of a sudden they have to have their name, they have to stamp their name on the ideas that they have. Whereas on Twitter, if you're Fluffy Boy 69, you can say whatever the fuck you want, and unless somebody doxes you, no one knows who the fuck you are. So you can say whatever you want without consequence. That's the biggest issue that we really stand here, is that, you know, there's no consequence for what you do. Even in a lot of cases, a lot of the swatting that happened, until like the one guy that got actually murdered, most of the time nothing ever happened to you if you swatted somebody. So no, when it comes to a simple thing, it's just going on Twitter and saying, respectively, I disagree, except in a much more volatile manner with a lot more name calling and potentially threatening of violence. You know, you don't have to worry about cops suddenly being calling you because there's not exactly an address for Fluffy Boy 69 anywhere. Right. So when it really comes down to it, it's just a matter of people know that they can get away with it, so why not say the most extreme thing you can think of, because it's not like it matters in the end. So encompassing everything that we've been talking about, it really just comes down to that idea that we actually have had these groups all along that are this volatile. It's just a million times easier now to do it without having to stand up for yourself and say it in person, where you kind of could risk getting punched in the fucking jaw.
Right. And one thing you said is that really stuck out to me was how, you know, Fluffmaster 69 doesn't have...
Fluffy Boy 69, thank you very much.
Oh, I apologize. Fluffy Boy 69 doesn't have an address. It's so much easier to be a keyboard warrior than it is to actually say something to someone else's face, because, you know, one thing I've heard before, and you can take it or leave it as far as whether it's true or not, is that, you know, nobody wants to be an asshole. And I think in part that's true, because no one wants to do that to your face. Like, because no one wants to receive the consequences of whatever retaliation may or may not be coming. But oh man, when you're sitting behind a keyboard and you're looking at a computer screen and you're just going away typing like, oh, I think that this is trash and you're filth for liking it. Like, you know, they can do that because there's no consequences. There's no repercussions from them putting it out there like that. And you know what, you get what I'm saying? You know, it's just so many people. I think it's just, there's the element of consequences and repercussions in person that are just not there when you're online.
I mean, again, this comes down to the fact that like neither of us have like a PhD in psychology. So, I mean, there's a lot of mental gymnastics that you kind of have to do in order to understand the basic psyche of a lot of these people. I mean, but as somebody who at least was a lonely gamer for a long period of time, and as somebody who's dealt with going down a specific, I don't know what I want to call it. I mean, I guess an anti-SJW rabbit hole, So I've been in those communities and I've seen it, and I've for a time believed certain parts of that ideology. That it really is just one of those things where it's easy to fall into that personality, that archetype of a person when you see it consistently, you hear it consistently, you watch it consistently, and when you can do it, again, like I said earlier, without repercussion because you can do it online under a guise. I have actually spoken in person with people about these kinds of things, and I've gotten blowback for it. Not physical blowback, but I've had arguments with people on stuff. And unlike a lot of these people that do it online and would never say it in person, I do it not because I truly believe the convictions that I'm in. Is I'm also the kind of person that wants to talk to people. I want to learn. I want to understand. So in order to understand the point of view of somebody else, I have to ask. And to circle it all around, how are you going to understand why someone likes the thing that they like more than something else if you don't ask them why? And I see a lot of people that are just so convinced that Last of Us Part 2, because we keep coming back to that it has to be the worst game ever. Even if I've played it or not, it has to be the worst game ever because I've seen so many places where I fit in on the internet say it's the worst thing out there. Whereas they don't seem to ever go up to the people that they fight because they always do the thing with Neil Druckmann where they call him Neil Cuckman, or they've harassed Laura Bailey to Kingdom Come, or anybody who writes nice articles about them, about the game online, they put nasty comments in the comment sections. They never go to any of these people and say, okay, you know what? Right now, I don't think this kind of game is the kind of thing that I can support, but sell me on it. No one does that. And it goes in the same vein of review scores where people they see somebody rate a game that they think's a 9, a 6, but they don't ask them why. They just see the score and they don't even read the reasons as to why. And even if they do, all they see is this person hates this game. Why the fuck do they hate this game? There's that sense of overwhelming emotional attachment that just has them look past every bit of information that's in front of them because all they feel is the bewilderment of somebody having a differing opinion. And instead of asking why they feel the way that they do, they immediately just go into "you're wrong" mode, which is the most unhelpful thing you can do, because we as gamers for how many fucking years were fighting for this to even be considered remotely as art, and now all of a sudden we got that a few years back, and here we are arguing about things because we don't think they should be games, or we don't think that these should exist as the pedestal or the top or the creme de la creme because we don't think it's good, even though art's always supposed to be subjective. It's that thing where no amount of understanding, no amount of research that I could possibly do could really get me to the bottom of that. It's just something that I will never understand, and all I can really do is just tell people, guys, it doesn't matter. If your opinion is that this game is Game of the Year, if it's a 10 out of 10, who cares if it doesn't get considered for Game of the Year awards, and if it doesn't get a 10 out of 10 on this specific website? Because even if no one else gives that game a 10 out of 10, or that movie a 10 out of, or I guess a 5-star rating, or that music album doesn't get any sales because the record companies don't push it, or nobody gives a liking to it, why does that matter? Because in the end, you think it's top shit. So go enjoy it like top shit.
Right. And running with that, I'll say just kind of what the whole point really of the Accolades episode is just if for anyone listening, if you enjoy something, don't let someone take that away from you. But at the same time, if someone is dogging on you, or if you don't well, let me rephrase, don't dog on anyone that enjoys something that you don't. Everyone is different. Everyone has their own tastes. Everyone has their own preferences, and everyone is going to enjoy what they choose to enjoy. Guys, it's video games. We're all gamers here, you know? It doesn't matter.
Stand up for yourself, but don't attack somebody else for the things that they like. And if you do, don't be surprised when they stand up for themselves.
Exactly. And that's right. It's you have some people who, and I'm one of them, who didn't really like Witcher 3, even though Witcher 3 was a very critically acclaimed game that came out that year.
Well, that's because you're wrong.
Probably. But I didn't care for Witcher 3. Cyberpunk looks promising. I want them to iron out the bugs first, but Cyberpunk does look promising. And Witcher 3 isn't my thing. And that's fine. That's okay. Apparently I'm wrong, but that's okay, and sometimes
Being
yeah.
wrong isn't necessarily, I guess, wrong.
Right.
Because it's not like you're universally wrong. Saying you don't like Witcher 3 isn't saying 2 plus 2 is 5.
Right.
So, I mean, you being quote unquote wrong, like if you're in the minority, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wrong opinion. It's just your opinion. So again, guys, if you don't like Last of Us Part 2, or if you don't like Ghost of Tsushima, or if you don't like any game out there, it doesn't matter if somebody else does. And it only honestly matters if somebody attacks you for liking what you like. I mean, I love anime, and I love harem anime, for example, and some people would call me deplorable or perverted or whatever you might want to call somebody who's into that kind of stuff, and I'll defend myself then. But if somebody goes out there and says, oh my god, Naruto is the greatest anime ever, the worst you will ever hear me say is just go, it's not my thing. That's the worst thing I will ever say, because who am I to tell another person what they should be watching? I can suggest stuff, but I shouldn't be telling them, oh, you shouldn't watch that, it's fucking garbage. Like, what kind of an asshole would I be to do that?
Right. And I'm personally myself, I'm not a huge anime fan. I've really only seen 2 animes in my whole lifetime. Avatar, The Last Airbender, which is one that everyone has seen, and the other one being Death Note. And that's because I actually was intrigued by the premise. Other than that, I'm not really an anime manga fan or anything like that. I'm not going to dog on someone or give them a hard time just because they like something that I don't. Because who am I to say that, oh, well, that's weird? Like, someone could just as easily look at me and say, oh, well, what you're into is weird. I don't want people to tell me what I like is wrong. Like, so, just play your games and just enjoy it.
Not to mention, isn't it a little bit weird that, like, you claim to be the kind of person that's like, oh, I just want either I want politics out of my games, or I just want to kick back and enjoy my video games, but you spend all this time giving people shit for just trying to enjoy their games. Like, isn't it weird that, like, a lot of people spend their own personal time giving a shit about what other people are doing with their own time? Like, it's as somebody who loves to just be on his own, like I'm living alone in my apartment right now, and I'm just playing Persona 5 Royal, and I can do that whenever I want, and I don't have anybody else in my head being like, hey, why are you playing that game? It's so nice to just be able to say, I have X amount of time today, I'm going to throw it into this game and not think about anything. Whereas there are a large amount of people, it seems, online, because there's that vocal minority that seems to think I'm too busy to actually give people shit for what they enjoy, to just go and enjoy my own stuff. Like, there are people that think that they have that kind of time, and I'm sure there are people that do, but there are people that are just devoting way too much time worrying about somebody else's tastes than their own, which seems so fucking weird.
I'll agree 100%. And again, like, personally, I've said everything I feel like I can say or should say as far as this is concerned. I mean, I grew up in a household where it was very strict, very orderly, and it was taught to us that I say us, me and my sibling, where, we were supposed to do things a certain way, believe things a certain way, and we were never really given room to be like our own person and our own individual. And that's kind of, and the whole point, the whole beauty, I'd say, of the human experience is being able to find out what makes you an individual. Like finding out what it is you like to do, finding out what it is that you like to enjoy. And when you sit back and you play a video game, like I said, I mean, shoot, I've been enjoying Maneater, Smash Ultimate, Borderlands 3, and I've been dabbling in Immortals Phoenix Rising. All four of those games are fairly different from the other. And that's fine. It like as long as you are doing what you like to do and you're doing what makes you happy, then why does it matter to you what someone else is doing? Just like why would you care? Like the fullest extent of which you should care when it comes to someone else playing something that you don't play is you should say, hey man, while that's not my personal taste, that's okay. I'm glad that you are enjoying it. You know? Like
Or,
that
or in
that
most
should be
cases,
the
saying
extent of
nothing
it.
at all. Because, again, it doesn't matter.
Right. Like it doesn't matter. Like it's okay to like just leave people alone and just let them play what they want to play. Like you know, that's just it. Like Persona 5 Royal, I tried to play it. It's just not my thing. I'm not going to hate on you because you play Persona 5. It's just it is what it is. Like I said, I feel like I've probably exhausted everything I know to say, and I'm running in circles as far as this is concerned. But
Well, it's easy to run into circles on this issue because Lord knows it's impossible to get into the mind of these people because a lot of them, no matter how hard you try, you can't reach them. It's like talking to a brick wall.
so I'm gonna just say this: like, as an Xbox gamer who is on a podcast with a PlayStation gamer, an American and a Canadian, like if we can be civil and be friends and talk about video games and just relax and be chill and non-confrontational about it, there is zero reason as to why anyone else should be talking about quote unquote Neil Cuckman or Last of Us 2 or hating on people just because they don't like something. Like, this is just the kind of person I am. Like, I don't have time for that crap. Don't come up to me saying like, "Oh man, well you're lame for not liking this." I'm like, "Oh, I don't care." One of the YouTubers I enjoy watching is Maximilian Dude. He's a fighting game YouTuber, and he did a video talking about people being super upset that Steve made it into Smash Brothers, and how while technically it wouldn't have been his first choice, he understood why Steve was in Smash now, and was like, for the people that like Steve, that like Minecraft, like I'm glad that they got their character. Like it's not my first choice, but I'm glad that they got what they wanted.
Well, yeah, the game's not tailored for any one person.
Right. Like, one thing for Smash Ultimate is like Smash is for everybody. And people that were like 12 or so, 8 to 12 years old when Minecraft came out, are in their 20s now. Like that's scary to think about. That,
Well, I mean, shit, like Steve's like their
and
Mario or their Link or their Samus. Like, that's what it is to them.
exactly. Like when Minecraft first came out, like now it's those people are in their 20s, they're playing Smash. Like Steve is their childhood video game character. And that's cool. Like a lot of people, it was. I know a lot of people when they got their first PlayStations, it was one of their first big gaming experiences that impacted them the most was Final Fantasy VII. And so, of course, when they see that Cloud announcement trailer for Smash Brothers 3DS and Wii U, like that was their childhood character. Me personally, if I had to pick a childhood character for Smash, for me anyway, I mean, obviously, mine was Mario. I mean, my first home console was a Super Nintendo, and I would play Super Mario World and Super Mario All Stars with my mom and with my sister all the time. Now, granted, Mario is not my favorite character to play as, but it's cool to see Mario in Smash being the first video game character that had any kind of memorable impact on my life. And I'm not going to hate on anyone who's a Mario main just because they choose to main Mario. Like, I respect that. Like, I get that because, like, I myself, as a kid, like, I loved Mario. To this day, I still do. Fine, like, I am dummy hype for Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury coming out on the Switch in February. Dummy hype for that. Part of me low-key hopes that Waluigi gets added into Smash. But I know that's never going to happen. But I'm also not one of these people you're going to see online putting it on blast. Like, put the Wa in Smash. Like, no. I'm not going to do that. Like, it's... just enjoy what you enjoy. If you enjoy it, cool. If you don't, stay away from it. Like, it's that simple. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that was the thing. Like, I made my little bit of point with Last of Us Part 2, where I said, look, I've read the leaks. From a writing standpoint, just on paper, I don't get it. But that doesn't mean the game's going to suck. All I know is that I'm not going to buy the game because I've never really been interested in it to begin with, and I'm not going to let that get to me. So it just really just comes down to, it's not that hard to just ignore something. It's that thing that we've been saying for a while when it was the flip side, when it was every issue that was like, oh, this girl has a slightly sexualized costume in this game. Oh, that's terrible. It's like, you can just not use it, or you can just not buy the game if you think that strongly about it. The same goes the other way around. If you don't like Last of Us Part 2 because you think it's too, like, SJW or liberal or left-leaning or even whatever reason you really don't like about it, if it's political based or if it's just game based, if it's story based, then you just don't play the game. It's really the easiest thing you can do in the world. So
I remember when Arkham City came out, and a lot of people were like, dude, why are y'all over sexualizing Catwoman in this game? And one of the things I was thinking about doing, because if you bought a new copy of the game, you would get the Catwoman Pass, which would allow you to download the Catwoman pack. And so for everyone that was buying the game new, if you didn't like how they portrayed Catwoman in Arkham City, like, you didn't have to have it. You didn't have to redeem that code. You didn't have to add on to the game. Like, that's fine. You could have just played the vanilla experience and it would have been okay. Like, you would have been fine. And yeah, and
it's just that simple bit of, like, it's just so easy to just turn away and walk in the direction that you want to go. It's so easy to do.
Like, how many times has anyone, I'd say, walked into a GameStop or a Best Buy or a Walmart or whatever, wherever it is that you buy your video games, and how easy is it for you to walk in and you're hoping that you'll see a game that you've been looking for that you want to buy, and how easy is it for you, once you find that game you're looking for, to pick it up and leave and just ignore all of the other games that you don't want or that you're not interested in?
It's actually really hard.
for some people, but I guess, like, I'm talking about for me personally, like, just a personal example. I'm not super crazy into sports games. I like racing games and I like hockey games, but outside of that, I don't mess with sports games. I'm not a Madden or a 2K fan or anything like that. So, like, if like, for an example, I'm going to GameStop and it's like, hey, I want Immortals Phoenix Rising. And they're like, okay, well, do you want anything else? And it's like, nope, I'm good. And I can just take my game and walk out. Like, I'm not a huge Call of Duty fan. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I will play it eventually, just not right now. I'm waiting for it to be cheaper, which it inevitably will be. and for them to iron out the bugs as well.
I can't help but imagine like going into a GameStop because I've had like people try to sell me games, and I can't imagine like that one person that's like, I'm just here to pick up Ghost of Tsushima. Can I get a copy? And they're like, yeah. Also, we have copies of Last of Us Part 2. Would you like that? And just watching them like get so mad and just start like having a hissy fit.
Exactly. Like if you no one is gonna do that in real life. So why would you act like that online? There's no
It's
reason
baffling.
or no excuse for anyone to be doing that.
So yeah, I wanted to do one more quick thing before we sign off for this, and because we've basically spent the entire show talking about the community, and that's generally where most of our time is going to be spent because it's not like we're industry executives, we're not people that work in the industry. So the community is kind of our bread and butter. There's one specific thing though about the industry that I think we all can agree needs to stop, and it's this fact that people use Metacritic for bonuses. I don't understand how there are companies out there that will say if you only get a bonus if you get this average rating on Metacritic by X amount of time. Because that happened to New Vegas. They were 1 point off of an 85, and they didn't get any bonuses from it. And apparently Cyberpunk was doing the same thing, and the bonuses were at 90.
Now I saw somewhere where they said that they were gonna get their bonuses anyway.
Yeah, that came
Regardless
out,
of
but
what
it's the fact that that exists that's my problem.
I think that, and this is just me, bonuses should be solely dependent on how, not necessarily how the game does critically, but based off of how many copies you sell.
Well, that's the
'Cause-
thing, right? If you sell 7 million copies, what's the matter if it's rated a 70 on Metacritic? You made a shit
Exactly.
ton of money.
New Vegas is, and on that note, you brought up New Vegas, and I'm glad you did. A lot of people say that New Vegas is the best Fallout game in the series. But it was 1 point shy of its Metascore,
If I'm
and
not mistaken, wasn't that because it was really buggy at launch?
maybe. But then again, to be fair, anything published by Bethesda has a fair share of.
Because I think that game
Bugs
was
and
also
glitches.
rushed out. I want to say that I remember reading like at some point like a while back. I think that game was like rushed out in like 18 months or something.
I believe it. Bethesda probably cracking the whip saying that, Obsidian needed to get to work. But now, fortunately, I mean, granted, Obsidian's probably busy with the Outer Worlds right now and the DLC for that. But now that Microsoft is going to have Bethesda and Obsidian under the same roof,
They got to make them play nice.
oh, I'm sure that they can, but having just the idea that we can have an Obsidian made New Vegas 2 is that just, oh, that makes my heart happy.
But turn it all around. Remember, people, just because it's a sequel to something doesn't mean it has to be better.
That's true. Because then again, just because, and another thing to look at too is like, yes, Microsoft can make New Vegas 2 happen, but they can also make Perfect Dark happen, and they are making it happen, but not at Rare, even though it's Rare's franchise. So it really just kind of depends. I don't really know, but it is. But yeah, go with the bonuses. I think that definitely, like, it should only be solely dependent on how many copies a game sells. Like, if it sells badly, then I don't think. Obviously, the bonus is not going to be as big because you don't have as much money flowing in from profits of the game. But if it sells ridiculously well, then obviously those bonuses should be a thing, because otherwise, where would the money go? What I mean?
It also comes down to that I think, because it might as well fit in with review scores, I don't understand why people have this, like, extreme need to use Metacritic as their basis on what games they get.
Right.
It goes in reviews in general, but, like, an arbitrary aggregate score that isn't even an accurate aggregate because it weighs certain places higher than others. Like, IGN score on Metacritic carries a lot more weight than some random website that attaches it to it. So it's not even like an average. It's really like the average among the mainstream with higher rating, right? So it's not even an accurate representation. Even the fan score isn't an accurate representation anymore because the second anything bad happens, people just downvote it to Kingdom Come with zeros, so just to fuck up the score. So it doesn't really matter in the end.
Like one thing, for an example, like you just said, just because you brought it up, I pulled out my phone and I'm looking at the Metacritic page for Cyberpunk 2077 and how there's most of the low reviews, most of them are all zeros and ones. All of them talking about how because they have the low frame rate and the poor graphic textures and everything else, how the game just automatically is awful terrible. Granted, I myself have not experienced those issues. I can't really speak to them, but just because they have a break in the immersion like that, automatically, like, bam, it's a zero. I think I'm with you on that. It's a little extreme.
I mean, I don't even give a shit on what people say on Metacritic. It's more like the people that look at it and be like, oh, it's only a 6.9 on fan score on Metacritic. Oh, it must not be that good a game. It's like, that's not true. It could be a great game for you. That's the point.
Right. And
It's like I don't look at games that I know I have interest in on review scores. The only time that I really care about a review score is if it's something that I don't really know if I want to try. And if it's universally got high ratings, then I'm like, okay, fine. When it's on sale, I'll take a look at it. But if it's something that I know I want to buy, like Cyberpunk, I knew 3 years ago when I pre-ordered it that I was going to get no matter what. Didn't even care what state it was in because I knew I was going to like it. And now, granted, I played an hour of it and I've put it down because it's too buggy for me that, like, visually it's just, I don't want my first run of the game to be an eyesore. But I still know that I'm going to enjoy the game because I've been playing long enough to know what I'm going to be into. So I can look at most games now and be like, yeah, I'll probably end up liking that. And I'll go for it. And even if it's not what I thought it was, I won't go, oh, this game is terrible. I'll just go, it just wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but that's all right. I gave it a shot. It's the same thing that people are like, oh, I'd never try that food. I try everything once, and I'll just say, yeah, I tried it. It wasn't my thing. That's the thing that I see missing from so many people online is that they're not willing to give anything room to be something. It's either you love it or you hate it. There's no in between to anything.
Right. And I knew, and like what you said, you knew 3 years ago that you would more than likely enjoy Cyberpunk. When they announced Doom Eternal, I knew I was going to love Doom Eternal. I knew that I had to play it. And I played through the campaign. Every once in a while, I'll go back and replay a mission or two, and I'll dabble. But other than that, I'll say, all in all, that Doom Eternal was a fun game. It was fun. Like, it's surprising how loud metal music slicing demons in half is just so relaxing. Even though it can be a very stressful game, it can be very relaxing after a long work day. I very much enjoyed it. The whole Mountain Dew, Doritos, metal music stereotype that kind of comes with video games was Doom Eternal. Like,
yeah, man, Mountain Dew and Doritos are fucking tasty.
Like, yeah, like if you watched a movie in the 90s and there was like a teenage kid playing video games, like Doom Eternal would have been the video game he was playing. And it's just, I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed Doom Eternal. I thought it was pretty good, and I knew I was going to get it. And it's just one of those things. It's like, you better than anyone else. Like, what you're going to like. You know what you're not going to like. If you know you're not going to like Last of Us 2, then obviously you're not going to go out of your way to buy Last of Us 2. If you know you're not going to like Ghost of Tsushima, you already know you're not going to go out of your way to buy Ghost of Tsushima. If you're just a person that likes to dabble in several different games and you pick up a game, you play it and you love it and you finish it, great. If you dabble in several games and you find a game that, you pick it, you buy it, you take it home, you play it, you don't like it as much, that's fine. take it back or trade it in for something else. Like it's really that simple. Like you don't have to tell the world that they're a piece of crap just because they like something that you don't. Like it costs $0 and 0 cents to mind your business. Like that's the thing there.
Yeah, it really just comes down to like enjoy what you enjoy, don't enjoy what you don't enjoy. Just don't get in anybody's fucking face about it. It's pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah.
But we're hitting an hour and a half, so I was going to ask if there was anything else you wanted to bring up. Otherwise, I think we've hit a pretty good spot to stop.
I'm good. Just whatever everyone's playing this week, enjoy it just because you like it, and that's good enough. That's all I have to say.
So yeah, that's going to do it for episode number 2 of Logic and Pixels. Thank you so much for checking us out. So if you are checking this out on YouTube, on my channel, obviously like the video, subscribe to the channel for more stuff. If you're listening to this on any audio service, which is, oh god, there's a lot of them now. Like the whole last 7 days, we put up a shit ton of different services on. So we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio. A whole bunch of other small stuff that I'm just blanking on the top of my head here. But if you're listening on any of those audio services and there's a way to rate us, please do give us a 5-star rating. Or, you know what, give us 4. I'll take 4. I'm pretty good with 4. But obviously, in any case, if you can share that with anybody that you think would be interested in this kind of stuff, or specifically anybody in this kind of show that does this kind of crap, send that their way. I'd be more than happy to have them listen to something like this because I think they need it. So thank you so much for checking us out. Thank you once again, Avery, for joining me on this episode. And I don't know what the topic is going to be like next week. We'll see what big things making people upset, and maybe that's what we go off of. But it's always flying by the seat of our pants with whatever's going on in the world, because Lord knows the gaming community as a whole is always an ever-shifting enigma.
That's the truth.
So yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for checking us out, and we will see you on the next show. Have a good one, everybody.